Good day, fellow Jersey nerds, and welcome to episode 70 of the Jersey Nerds podcast, powered by HockeyJerseyConcepts.com. I'm your host, Ryan, and today on the Nerdcast, we're bringing back the HJC Mailbag. We asked you guys to submit some questions, and we got a couple questions in using Twitter and the hashtag HJC Mailbag, so we'll get into those this week. Plus, also, we're doing a little something called the good, the bad, and the misunderstood, and we'll explain that a little more once we get into it. But what would the podcast be without our co-hosts? And joining us this week are Shawn and Beepo. Shawn, what's going on?
Recording live from a mystery location in somewhere in Nova Scotia that used to be a Target.
Are you in a...
All right, guys, it's time to dox Shawn.
If you could figure out where Targets used to be in Nova Scotia. No, but in all seriousness, enjoying what I can only describe as an ice storm. That's always nice, you know.
Ooh, yum.
You got at least one a year. March is actually the winteriest month in Nova Scotia. Go figure. For this podcast, I decided to wear my favorite Oilers jersey, the big yoke edge cut of the orange jersey. Great name for that. Patrick Maroon, just an outstanding guy.
Doesn't it bother you that the back of your jersey says maroon, but in fact there's no maroon on the jersey anywhere?
That's why it's kind of nice that he's playing for the Devils. Now, it would be really nice if he played for the Avalanche or the Coyotes.
I think he's playing for the Blues.
You know what would be great? If he played for the Maroons. Speaking of the Maroons, we're going to get an early plug-in. Go submit to our competition. Do March 8th.
Yeah.
Well done, Beepo.
Put Maroon on the back.
Don't be a dweeb. Don't be a dweeb. Submit a concept for that. Stop being I just only do current teams. Why does I have to experiment with an older team? No. Show some respect for the dead, damn it.
I do find the best way to get entries for the competition is to insult the people. So thank you, Shawn, for doing that.
I learned it from Eric Cartman.
Also joining us, Beepo. What's going on, Beepo?
Just recording a podcast, Ryan. Not as nice of a podcast as last week, but how are you doing, Ryan?
I'm hanging in there, just waiting for winter to end. Shawn's going through the ice storm right now, and we're in March, so it's time for winter to go away. Plus, also, you can feel it. Playoffs are right around the corner, so kind of getting excited for that. I got to ask you, Beepo, as a Penguins fan, are they getting in this year?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I'm going to say that until they're mathematically eliminated, but I still trust the Penguins to have the kind of late season surge that they usually do and make it into the playoffs.
You like the Hurricanes, Shawn?
Hurricanes, yeah. You know why? Drought ends this year. I mean, it's been a while.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just it, It's been a while.
So
I really wish the Hurricanes weren't in the Metro because I love their celebrations and I want to cheer for them to win so bad to see more of them, but I can't. Even if they were first in the division, like Tampa, that far ahead, I would love it because then it's okay, they're in the playoffs, they're not competing with the Penguins. I want to see them make the playoffs as long as the Penguins aren't the ones being eliminated at their hand.
All right, let's take a look at the 4 wildcard teams in the East. We have Carolina, Montreal, Pittsburgh, Columbus. We'll consider everyone else out. We'll take those 4 teams. Shawn, which 2 teams are going to get in?
Well, there's 4. There's 3 spots.
Well, 2. Let's consider 2 wildcard spots here. Who's taking the 2
wildcard teams? I'm going to say Columbus and no. This is tough. Okay, Montreal's in for sure. And I'm going to say Pittsburgh gets to number 3. Carolina is the wild card. Columbus misses.
Columbus out. Wow. Okay. Beepo, your 2 wild card picks.
I want to say Columbus misses it too, just because it would be hilarious after all they've done at the deadline. But I'm going to say Montreal misses for not much of a reason because I don't follow the other teams very much. I guess that's just what I'd prefer aside from the hilarity of Columbus, but I think their additions are going to help them get into the playoffs. So
they better.
I really have no idea here. I'm just taking a wild guess.
Otherwise, the whole roster goes to Florida.
And somehow they still miss the playoffs because they're Florida. All right. So,
by the way, fun fact: Tampa Bay just has to win 5 more games They will have more points than Carolina has ever had in a season. Also, fun fact, Carolina has only made the playoffs 5 times ever.
Ever?
Wow. 99, 01, 02, 06, and 09.
Wow, that's
bad. And if
bad.
they don't make it this year, they will have missed the playoffs for an entire decade.
That's bad. That's not good.
Another fun fact, Tampa Bay is at 50 points before Ottawa did once. Tampa's at over 100, and Ottawa is, let's see, are they still at 49? Nope, they're at 51. But, as of like a day or two ago, Tampa was over 100 points, and Ottawa was at 4. So they must have won like yesterday or something.
Yeah,
Ottawa beat Florida yesterday.
Everyone beats Florida. I decided today that there's no other choice for the Stanley Cup this year other than Tampa Bay. I just can't.
Yes, there is.
Well, I know Winnipeg is quite good this year.
Win in its name.
Team with darn, there's no other teams with win in their name. I was going to make a joke.
Me. Yeah. And you know what? There's no Golden Knights to get in the way this year.
I don't know. What if Nashville wins the division?
You don't want that starting up. That's fine.
All right.
Taz will be happy.
All right. So we're all here. We're ready to go, and we'll be right back with the mailbag. This is the HJC Podcast Network. New shows every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. So for this week, we brought back the HJC Mailbag. This used to be something that we did regularly when we were just the HJC Podcast before the Jersey Nerds Podcast. But this week on Twitter, put out a tweet a couple times saying, send in your questions using the hashtag HJC Mailbag. We got a couple questions from Alan and Chris, so we'll be reading those this week, but not before we bring back the old theme. Mailbag indeed. All right, here we go. This one comes from Alan at AJHFTW on Twitter. And Alan says, the Edmonton Oilers have been the tanker for most of the 2010s. Which team will be the tanker of the 2020s? And at this point, I mean, things can change in 2 years or a year. But at this point, how do you not say, I would have to choose Ottawa just because things look so bleak for them right now, but apparently they have decent prospects and they should be turning it around. But maybe Ottawa or Florida, because Florida can never seem to get it together no matter what they do. I don't know. Shawn, who do you think is going to be the kind of laughing stock of the next decade?
All right, so the way I look at it is Ottawa and New York are at the same point. They've sold off, so we're in rebuild now, but they've at least sold off. So I don't think that they're going to be the worst. Chicago hasn't even started, but they're in the playoff hunt now. So, the West is that weak. New Jersey is, so you could call this a sophomore slump, let's say. I just think this is a bad year for them. Detroit's the candidate, honestly. They're probably the team in the East because, say what you will about Ottawa, they've sold off. The junk's gone. At this point, there's only one place to go, and I think that they have some good pieces in place, as much as I hate to say it. Detroit, on the other hand, I don't know what they're doing, to be honest. I can't remember their last rebuild. It was in the early 80s.
That's probably the Yzerman draft. That's how they got Yzerman, probably.
That's what it was.
Yep.
That's what it was. I think that they had that terrible span in the late 70s and early 80s, so, And if my hockey history is correct, they did the exact same thing they're doing now during that period in just signing short-term veteran players. But the team I think that will be the tanker of the decade is the Anaheim Ducks. And the reason being, I think they have to go through a hard rebuild. Because right now, you have a lot of guys on that team that are just spinning their wheels. You have arguably one of the best goalies in the league, and he's getting nothing. And while he's loyal now, we don't know how long that's going to be. You're going to lose Getzlaf fairly early in the decade. Perry, you'd better trade him. BX is gone. Kessler's gone. What are you left with?
Yeah, that could be. It's a hard question to answer just because.
Drafted.
Yeah, just because it's so easy,
and
so quick to turn over a team now. It's kind of a hard question.
How do you attract free agents? Well, look at it this way: Arizona currently, who plays, I would call good but not great hockey.
Arizona's making a push to get into the playoffs this year.
They're trying. They're doing okay. And I look at it, and they're getting free agents more than Anaheim, more than the other team. I'd say LA, because they have to do a hard roster or turnover for sure. The difference is everybody's old at this point. Future Hall of Famer Jonathan Quick is injury prone as hell right now. And unless Peter Budaj has another magical season for them, you're stuck with Cal Peterson and Jack Campbell. Great.
Yeah, well, you're thinking pretty short. I mean, you're mentioning the players they have now, but I do like that LA pick, mainly because they're stuck with that Kopitar contract for a while. But
and who's that other guy that they got? Some random guy from Russia. Oh, what was his name?
At least that's only 3 years for them.
It was a 3-year. Yeah, what a weird thing. It's not like he had any prior NHL experience that possibly could have led to a Hall of Fame bid, and now seems to be a little bit tarnished.
Yeah, I like your LA pick there. Beepo, I don't know if Pittsburgh can fall into this category, but who's going to be the loser team for the 2020s?
I'm going to preface this by saying, again, I'm not exactly a hockey analyst. I wouldn't mind being one, but I'm not quite there. And I like Shawn's picks of Anaheim, Detroit, and LA. I think they could all fall into that category. I'm going to throw in the obvious pick of Ottawa, because if you look at a team like Edmonton, what was the problem? Was it necessarily the GM or the coaching? I mean, maybe that they didn't have world-class GM or coaching, but it was the ownership who meddled in everything.
Yeah.
And even now Chiarelli's fired. It's going to be the ownership that's going to mess up anything that they have there. And Ottawa, the same deal. If Melnyk is still there, he has great potential to mess up whatever they have now. Because, I mean, look at Dorian. He even got back Eric Brandstrom in the Mark Stone trade, who, from what I've heard, is basically could be the next Erik Karlsson. But I wouldn't put it past Ottawa, or Melnyk, I should say, to mess that up. Another potential candidate for this is Columbus, if they don't manage to re-sign Duchesne, Pinard, Bobrovsky, and Dzingel. If they don't manage to re-sign any of them and they all leave, they're kind of screwed. I mean, they'd have a lot of money to work with, and I don't think they're completely, they have absolutely no chance. But that would really set them back a lot. And, I mean, especially if they miss the playoffs, Yarmo's out.
That's a great point.
If they miss the playoffs, that's just awful for them. And real quick, I'm just going to mention, too, this is going to be a quick one. You mentioned the Penguins. I hate to say it, but once Crosby and Malkin start going down, getting older, I don't really know what's going to happen to them. I mean, they've got guys like Jake Gensel, and they have a pretty good draft history, but I think the farm system is starting to dry up a little bit. And, of course, Crosby and Malkin are generational guys, especially Crosby, who you just can't replace easily, if at all. You'd have to get a McDavid type of guy, and literally the only other guy like that in the league is McDavid right now. So Penguins are going to be in a tough place once Crosby and Malkin are gone.
Going back to your Columbus point, it'll be very interesting if they end up being the laughingstock for the next decade. If we can look back at 2019 as the year they traded away all of their draft picks, and that will kind of be the landmark year where the decline started. And you can look at, hey, remember when they traded away all the draft picks, and here's all the options they could have had, and look where they are now. They haven't made the playoffs in the past 7 years or whatever it becomes. And secondly, on Pittsburgh, I don't know when Crosby's going to slow down or when Malkin's going to slow down, because especially Crosby, I mean, apparently his conditioning and just the work ethic that he has is so incredible that he may not slow down until he's mid-40s. Who knows? He may be like a Yager type. But let's just say for as many good years as the Penguins have had in their history, with maybe the best player in the world, and I'm including Crosby's time and Lemieux's time, if there has to be equal amount of downtime, has Pittsburgh already paid their price? Because quite frankly, before they got Crosby, they were on the verge of losing that franchise. So thinking if equal payments of good and bad need to be made, has Pittsburgh paid enough of a price to equal the amount of good that they've gone through, considering Crosby, Lemieux, and Malkin?
Yeah. I don't know. It's probably fairly close. I mean, I know they had some decently successful teams, between their inception and before the Cups. I don't know what years exactly. As big of a Pens fan as I am, I'm not a huge history aficionado with even the Penguins. I can't name exact years for you unless it's about the jerseys for the most part. But I know they've had some decently successful teams that just never really amounted to anything in the postseason. So it's not like they were a complete failure. Of course, they did have a couple of the relocation and those kind of scares. But it's even if they do not, like if they, after Crosby and Malkin are gone, if they miss the playoffs for 10 straight years, I'm okay with the 3 cups they won here and the 2 that they won in the 90s and all the success they've had. I think it's worth it.
Shawn, has Pittsburgh paid enough of a price?
As somebody who remembers when they were that bad, oh yeah. So to give you an idea, Pittsburgh in their history has made the playoffs 32 times. They made it through more than half of the 70s. They were actually a fairly consistent middle-of-the-road playoff team through the 70s. They only made it 4 times in the 80s. Made it every year in the 90s. And then only made it 4 times in the 2000s. So from 2001 to 2007, they did not make the playoffs. To give you an idea at this point, this was the time that Jágr was traded for Chris Beach, which we all know is probably the worst trade in NHL history for both teams. This is an era when Sebastian Caron was the starting goalie at several points. This was a time when Pittsburgh was threatened to be relocated to Kansas City by a certain Mr. Jim Balsillie, who Ryan and I will be very familiar with as he's from our neck in the woods.
Well, anybody who was a fan of BlackBerry back in the day as well.
Back in the day, this is my OG memories right here, Ryan. These are the Pittsburgh Penguins I really remember. Yeah, here. So unless they trade Malkin for Chris Beach, Michael Civic, and Ross Lupaschuk,
who are you talking about?
That's who they traded Jágr for.
Oh, okay. So I think at some point they'll get to the point where they want to keep Crosby. They're thinking there's probably one last push, and it will probably Malkin traded at some point.
Yeah, if they trade Malkin for
5 years
a couple of young guys. Yeah, exactly. The Pittsburgh Penguins were so bad in that era, and granted, they were just as bad in the early 80s, but I don't remember this. They were so bad in that era, it was almost unbelievable, and they didn't make any good moves, except for with the exception of drafting Malkin, Fleury, and Crosby. The team couldn't make a good trade or a good free agent signing to save their life. And I think that honestly, that span right there, I don't see the Penguins falling below a 11th place team. Think about the Leafs before they will be as bad as the Leafs were in 2009. Okay, 78 points, mediocre, but some bright spots, and it's going to get better. But you got to take your lumps.
All right, good. So, well, we got pretty in depth on that question. Next question comes from Chris at ChrisJJordan15 on Twitter. He said, "Love that you're bringing this back," referring to the mailbag. My question is, what's your guys' favorite and least favorite jersey of all time that uses either a vintage white or cream color? It doesn't have to be in the NHL, but I can't really think of anything outside the NHL. So, favorite jersey that uses vintage white. We'll start with our favorite jersey that uses vintage white. And I can't help but choose anything from a green jersey from the Minnesota Wild. I'll go with their current one because I think it's fantastic. We've talked about it before on previous episodes of the podcast, but just a really solid layout plus that forest green and vintage white look great together. And Minnesota owned that vintage white. They took it on as their own before it kind of became a trend. So for me, that's probably the best all-time jersey using vintage white. Shawn, what do you think?
This is a tough one. Mine will actually go outside the NHL. I'm going to go to the Q, and I'm going to go with the Halifax Mooseheads 25th anniversary jersey. Very similar to, think of it as a cream-colored Minnesota North Stars jersey without a yoke, and the colors being red and green. Very nice jersey. Barely misses the Christmas jersey comparison, but the vintage white actually helps with that. It's one of the few cases where I think a roundel logo really looks good. It's a really solid jersey, and I think that you could, with stripping the anniversary elements, really keep a solid alternate here.
Beepo, best jersey to use vintage white or cream color?
This is a tough one, and my top choice might be Minnesota's home like yours, but I'm not going to talk about it since you already did. My next picks are kind of between two. I like the New York Rangers 2012 Winter Classics, but I don't like the inconsistency of them. That's the only thing really holding me back. I love the way that the colors look on the vintage white. I think it's absolutely beautiful, but if the stripes were consistent, it would probably be my surefire number one. But for my number one, which is still kind of a tough choice for me to put at number one because I'm not sure if it would look better in regular white than it would in vintage white, but I got to give it to Detroit's 2014 Winter Classic. It's just an absolutely beautiful jersey, even if it's in vintage white and the regular white would look better. It's just a gorgeous jersey. I think we've talked about it on the podcast before. I'm sure we've had to at some point. The red looks great as always with Detroit. The striping gets great. I love the captain's assistant's patches on the arm. The script over the logo, I don't love it. I don't hate it. It works. I don't know if it's the best option. The font, I really like the font. There's not too much to dislike about this one, honestly. Maybe aside from the vintage white being replaced with regular white.
All right, let's go to the second part of the question and your least favorite jersey that uses this color. And I can't think of one that I hate. You guys might jog my memory with your answers, but I guess my least favorite one, and it's not really even that bad, it was in Beepo's favor, but the 2012 Rangers Winter Classic jersey. It's, I guess, a good jersey, just kind of a regular jersey, but I don't really have a bad one that's coming to mind that uses vintage white. I don't know about you, Shawn.
Yeah, there's not a lot of jerseys out there that I think use vintage white that are particularly horrible. I think that the one that comes to mind that I think the most overrated is the Chicago 2009 Winter Classic. That one's just I've never had an affinity for it. I've always seen it as kind of middle of the road, mediocre. Other than that, I will say that there was, and I'm trying to remember this, you were at the game that this was worn at. Hamilton's was that vintage white.
Yes, it was. Outdoor Classic one.
That
2012
was a mess.
AHL Outdoor Classic.
Let me get a...
I remember originally liking that jersey, but yeah, as time has gone on, that one's a bit of a mess. That's a vintage white jersey. I think they went with kind of as if like the Montreal Canadiens chest stripe was vintage white, and then outline it in red and then blue.
Yeah, but this is what I remember about it, was that it was a red helmet, red sleeves, blue pants, blue numbers, and it looked really off. And I thought that it looked okay at the time. And in fact, the jersey looks great on its own, but the gear ruined it. Yeah, okay, you know what? I'm going to give it to this one.
All right. Beepo, the worst jersey using the color vintage white.
I'm going to give this to two of them. I'm going to start with Columbus's current alternate. I'm not going to talk about it much more right now because I can see that I can get into that one a little bit later on the podcast in more in depth. But the other one I'm going to give it to is the Penguins 2011 Winter Classic jersey. Now, that's a good jersey overall. Sure. If you take the vintage white out of it, it's gorgeous. The vintage white just doesn't work well, especially in the stripes on the hem and arms with that light blue color. It just doesn't mesh super well. It kind of bleeds together. Using a regular white, I think, would have it pop out much more, and the vintage white on this one seems more like vintage white for vintage white's sake than an actual sort of design element choice.
All right, good stuff there. Thanks for sending that in, Chris. Our last question for the mailbag, we'll go back to Alan for this one. Again, on Twitter using the hashtag HJC Mailbag. If all of the NHL teams replace the Adidas collars with the CCM Quick-Lite collars, will it make the jerseys look better or worse? Shawn, you can lead us off here.
Worse by far. Yeah, I think it'd work for a couple teams, but overall, I just can't see. Like, what's funny about it is that, like, could Detroit pull it off? Oh, sure. Yeah, you know what? That would look okay, especially on the home. The problem with it is that a lot of these teams use collars that kind of stick out a little more than they should. So, you know, a team like, let's see. Yeah, Chicago. It just looked terrible. It just looked like Edmonton. That looked terrible. Montreal. That looked terrible. The Islanders. It looked terrible. You know, it's like there's some teams, again, that'll really look good with this. Winnipeg would actually look the best from this, you know, because carbon fiber and, you know, I think they use carbon fiber in planes. Don't quote me on that one.
Let's go with it. Pass it off as fact. Yes, they do.
Yes, they use carbon fiber in planes. Tampa's alternate, hell, probably could use a little bit of Quick-Lite, actually. Pittsburgh, yeah, Quick-Lite. Carbon fiber is almost the same as steel.
So, all right, Beepo, would the CCM Quick-Lite collars look better than the Adidas collars in the NHL?
I definitely think the Adidas collars are a lot better. I mean, the CCM Quick-Lite collars aren't god-awful, especially if they're used right, but I mean, as awful as the Adidas half collars may be, I think it's better than at least, I haven't looked at every AHL team, but just looking at the All-Star jerseys, you have that collar insert as a contrasting color, it seems a lot. So that, I don't think that looks good. I think, honestly, debatably, having the Pentagon in a separate color is worse than the half collar most of the time. So having that with more NHL jerseys than not, I think would just be an automatic downgrade right from the get-go. Plus, do they even have a trim option for these Quick-Lite collars? Or is it just one solid color and a insert?
No, it's kind of like the Edge collars where there's a two color option. I haven't seen a 3-color collar, but I've seen a 2-color option.
Well, I was going to say, if they didn't have a trim option, then that would have just automatically made it even worse. But if it has a trim option and not just one solid color, then that negates that point there. But yeah, I definitely think the Adidas collars are better. Maybe not by a huge margin, but they're definitely better.
Yeah, overall, I'd have to take the Adidas collars. I think the only exception for me would be just the standard plain collar, no laces. CCM Quick-Lite beats Adidas on that one. But any CCM Quick-Lite collar with laces, or that's not just the standard collar, is just too much, too gimmicky, just trying to be different for the sake of being different. So I think Adidas does a better job on their collars. So again, thanks to everyone who sent in a question for the mailbag using the hashtag HJC Mailbag on Twitter. We may do this again going forward, so be heads up on our Twitter account when we put out the tweet, and get your questions in if you want to have them answered for the HJC Mailbag. We're now going to do a segment called The Good, the Bad, and the Misunderstood. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come up for the bad, our worst NHL jersey of all time. And the one I'm going to mention has been unfortunately mentioned too many times on previous episodes of this podcast. As far as the good, we're going to choose a good NHL jersey, but that is widely considered to be a bad jersey. So it's a bad jersey to everyone else, but to you, it's a good jersey. And then we're also going to go for a bad jersey that most people consider good. So we'll start off with our worst all-time NHL jerseys. We're talking NHL jerseys across the board here. And I'm just going to come right out and say it. I don't care what you guys say. The Buffalo Slug is officially the worst jersey all time in the NHL. The gold front and the blue cape back is ridiculous. The 97
Wrong jersey, Ryan.
the 97
You
shades.
said the Buffalo Slug.
Oh, yeah, you're
Nice
right.
try.
The turd burger. Not the Buffalo
Wait,
Slug.
I thought you were just trying to get on my nerves.
Yeah.
I thought there was a clever little.
That's what happens.
I was gonna say, I thought you didn't have a
expecting-
problem with the Buffalo Slug.
I wrote down on my
I was
list here.
completely expecting Turd Burger, and then you say Buffalo Slug. I'm like, what?
I knew what I was talking about, but I wrote on my paper here Buffalo Slug, and I shouldn't have done that. I'm totally talking about the Turd Burger. But the Turd Burger is a piece of crap. Worst all-time jersey. And I should probably not talk about it anymore because I've clearly screwed it up to this point. Beepo, your worst all-time NHL jersey.
Now, I might be forgetting some here, and
That's
I'm
all
going
right.
to... While Ryan emphasizes a little bit more the absurdity of the Turd Burger, and while I know Shawn and I find that as a bit of a character, a flaw that brings character to it, I'm thinking more along the lines of jerseys that are just so plain that they're just terrible. And two of my runner-ups would definitely have to be, I think, Edmonton's original Edge, which I do own the blue version of it, even though I don't necessarily like it. And then you've got Dallas's original Edge. I mean, of course, not pre-Edge. But we've talked about this one recently because it's a new jersey, but Tampa Bay's alternate. It looks like a plain black jersey half the time. And I don't know if you can get much plainer than literally looking plain black with a logo on it. Even the numbers, I mean, they're not invisible, but they're hard to decipher a little bit. The sleeve numbers, if I remember correctly, were okay. But just if they had a brighter gray or used blue or something else, it would have been ugly, but it would have not been super boring. It might have had that Turd Burger sort of charm to it. But the way that it looks like a plain black jersey if you're watching it from a distance on TV. I can't say how it looks in person. I haven't seen it in person. I wouldn't mind seeing it in a game in person, but from watching the Penguins play the Lightning one time in these jerseys, it's just bad. It's just so plain.
Shawn, we've had the Turd Burger. We've had Tampa Bay's Gradient alternate. What's your worst jersey from the NHL of all time?
All right, I'm going to give this to something that a lot of people, I think, let pass under the radar because it won a Stanley Cup. And to be fair, it wasn't actually this jersey that won the Stanley Cup. It was the previous one, which I think is okay. And this has to do a lot with the material and the jersey cut. The Anaheim Ducks from 2007 to, I think it was 2014, and I'm right, 2014, looked like trash. These were not good jerseys by any means whatsoever. Terrible collar. You know, the striping pattern itself, if we go back to 2006, the swoosh on the side of the jersey ended nicely and then came back around. There was no abrupt ending. The script was straight, okay? You know, it looked okay. There was no shoulder patch, sure, but you know what? These were okay, especially considering that they had to come up with these in 1 year. That Disney dropped their ownership, and the team just had to be like, "Oh crap, we got to do something new." So you know what? I'll give them the pass. But for close to 8 more years to hang on to this garbage, and then to put it onto the Edge template and do what I can only describe as miss a chunk of the striping, whereas the side panel cuts off the formerly kind of neat little hem swoosh. And now it just sort of ends and then starts up again. These were crap. And then they angled the non-logo. Like that duck script logo was fine for 1 year, sure, but they really looked like a roller hockey team for a while afterwards. You know, couple that with the fact that they just could have used the D with it and the jerseys would have been okay. Very mediocre color scheme and just overall disappointing, really just indicative of the time. There's no character. There's no color. It's just dark, moot. The numbers look weird. And by 2014, the team came up with something a lot better. So my pick for that, above anything else is is these weird, just gross duck jerseys.
All right, so that is our worst jerseys of all time. It's now time to come up with a bad jersey from the NHL, but that most people consider to be good. And I'll start us off here. And I can't believe that most people like this jersey. There's kind of this swelling of energy behind it. People want to see it brought back, and I think it's just awful. And I'm talking about the mid-90s Calgary Flames. It's become known as the podium jersey. This has the hem stripes, and then they angle up into the primary crest. This is an awful jersey, but every time I seem to mention it to people, there's these people who come back and say, "Oh no, it'd be great to see those again. Those are awesome. I'd love that to come out as a vintage jersey." And I just think that is a really terrible jersey. It has not aged well. It didn't take long for it to start aging poorly. So I'm taking the Calgary Flames mid-90s jerseys as my bad jersey that most people consider to be good. Beepo, same criteria for you.
Now, I have a couple runners-up for this one. First of all, Winnipeg. While I don't think these jerseys are awful, I don't like the road especially because the inconsistency just really bothers me about it. The home jersey, I don't particularly like it, and I don't really know why. It's one of those things I can't explain because looking at it, the striping is consistent, and everything is really just fine from a technical aspect aside from that pentagon. I've just never really liked the way it looks. I can't explain it. I'm sorry, Shawn, I can't explain it. Another one is Buffalo, where these aren't bad. I think most people like them for the most part, but I've never liked them that much either. And I'm a big proponent that they should move back to royal blue. And maybe the navy is part of the reason I don't like it. Maybe it's the silver. I'm not really sure. But my number one pick has to be Columbus's alternate. I told you I'd get back to this. And when I look at this thing, it's a really nice jersey. They would have had an absolutely excellent alternate jersey. And then they added the silver. The silver completely ruins it for me, and it's hard for me to even find it good. It does not work well with the vintage white. It does not work well with the blue. And guess what? They have it in between the vintage white and the light blue. They put it in the absolute worst spot that they could have and just literally replace that silver in the striping. And I'm not really sure where else exactly it is. But if you just replace that silver in the striping, even if you left it everywhere else, if you replace it in the striping with navy blue, this jersey is gorgeous and one of my favorites in the NHL. I'm surprised that just that one color ruins it so much, but it really does. It annoys me so much because it could be so good, but it's not.
All right, Shawn, a bad NHL jersey that most people consider good.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take a really controversial pick here. And again, this has to come down to the cut. I've never understood people's fascination with the Oilers Dynasty era jerseys. Now, at the time, they were probably one of the better looking teams in the NHL. That's for sure. It was when they brought them back. This was not a jersey that translated well, I think, to the Edge template at all. You know, it lost its charm with the formerly super wide, long, yokes. The hem stripe was super thick. The primary logo was actually quite small. You know, it was very indicative of the 80s and early 90s. You know, I do like the Dynasty era jerseys themselves, but all that charm of the era was taken out when it came over to Edge, maybe because the teams were so awful. And, you know, it kind of stunted a team that has a lot of potential for a lot of different looks that they can pull off. Their logo allows for them to use almost any striping pattern and it'll look good, as long as they, friggin' complete the striping pattern. But this was just a jersey that I'd see it, and I'm like, you guys are a cheap carbon clone of your original, you'll never amount to that greatness, And then when they eventually did ditch it, I was like, okay, good, finally. They came up with something relatively new. They kept the superior away, and they came up with an orange home, only to bring it back less than a year later. Yeah, no, I don't think that the Oilers blue with the orange yolks, Dynasty era jerseys are that good, but a lot of people do.
All right, good stuff there. It's time to move on now to a good NHL jersey that most people consider to be bad. And I'm taking the LA Kings current home jersey. There's a ton of negativity about the LA Kings look because it's black and silver. But most people look at it as black and white or black and gray, pretty boring. And I don't look at that look at it that way at all. I grew up with the Kings in this color scheme, so this is how the Kings are to me. The old Kings are purple and gold. The current Kings are black and silver. And I like the quote home plate logo. I think it's a really nice shield as opposed to being a typical shield shape or maybe a roundel, which is always popular. I really like this being a little bit different. And to me, the black and the silver totally suit what I would call kind of LA nightlife. And I just think that the jerseys look really, really solid. So I like those jerseys, even though most people don't. How about you, Beepo?
I have two picks again, and I'm going to hopefully talk about one a lot less than the other. My first pick is Winnipeg's alternate. Now, I'm not sure this is an unpopular opinion amongst us jersey nerds, but I know that a lot of people on Twitter and social media and stuff like that, they just don't like this jersey at all, and I just don't understand it. I mean, maybe it's a tad plain, but it's not that bad. It has very classic chest or hem striping. The script logo is gorgeous. The numbers are fine. It really takes inspiration from. I know people, or I think somebody pointed out that it's pretty much an exact copy of, what was it? Not Johnstown Jets, right? Was it Johnstown Jets?
I forget the team name.
I know it was some other Jets team, I believe. And it looks almost like an exact copy. And even if it is, it also looks like it takes a lot of inspiration from the Jets jerseys of the 90s. So whether the exact copy thing is a coincidence or not, it's still a nice jersey either way, and it's kind of a nice homage to pay to either of them. But my number one pick is going to be Nashville's home. And I know that this is a pretty unpopular pick even amongst us jersey nerds because a lot of people say it's too plain. And I'll concede it's a little plain. I think the white stripe could use to be a bit thicker. But whenever you see it in the full uniform, and honestly, even whenever you don't, even whenever it's just a jersey on its own, it's not that bad. When you look at it especially as taking the inspiration from the Tennessee flag, it looks just like the Tennessee flag. It takes its striping straight from there. And I think that's a really nice way to put it in the jersey. It kind of loses the piping and stuff like that the Edge version had, which wasn't awful on the Edge version for the Predators, but it wasn't great. And it uses a very sort of simple striping to do what it needs to do. If the white stripe was a tad bit thicker, I'm not sure anybody would really have a problem with this thing. I know that I hated this thing whenever it was first released, but the more that I see it, the more that I begin to like it. And while it's not the greatest, I think it gets way more hate than it truly deserves.
All right, Shawn, a good NHL jersey that most people consider to be bad.
I could do a whole list of these, but most of them at this point, I think, have gotten the love that they deserve. The Buffalo Slug at this point is a you love it or hate it type thing. It's not a universal hate. I think that most people have at this point admitted that it's not the worst thing ever. You have things like the Burger King and the Fisherman jersey and the Thrasher's Asymmetrical jersey that have a lot of charm to them. But there's one jersey in that sort of category that I think never really got the respect it deserves. And that's the Mooterus. I'm a huge fan of the Mooterus, to be honest. You talk about what's wrong with it. It's very obvious. The logo has, a pattern on it that vaguely looks like a uterus, if not completely. Yeah, it's very funny. There's a lot of potential here. The striping itself, I love it. The curved striping on the hem up to the arms, it all matches very nicely. Good color balancing here. I like the addition of red. You could have made it white and it would have looked better, to be fair. But you know what? The red doesn't look that bad. The logo, I think, is actually very well done. If you'd keep the star for the eyes. And in fact, you can actually keep the stars where they are. Just get rid of the lines. It looks really good. I like that swoosh for the one with the shooting star on the one horn. That's really good. I know that the Stars players hated these things, like absolutely hated them. But at the same time, this, in a lot of ways, this was somebody looking at this point, I think, close to a decade-old jersey in the Stars' home and going, all right, we need something new. And they bred some new life into it. It's just like the only time the Stars logo was ever something that wasn't just straight up a star. And I think that deserves to be admired in a way. It really was a jersey that wasn't similar to the Buffalo Slug. It really wasn't appreciated at its time. But as the years went on, people seem to hopefully have found things to like about it. And eventually, I think we'll look back at this as, the jersey in an era where anything but a curved stripe was used, that this was the jersey to come in and do it.
I agree with you on that one, Shawn. That was always, to me, the Dallas Stars alternate jersey, and it didn't become the Mooterus until someone pointed it out to me. Or said, oh, look, that's the Mooterus. And I'm like, what? Oh, okay. And now it's going to be the Mooterus. It always will be the Mooterus. So I'm with you on that Dallas Stars one. Currently going on hockeyjerseyconcepts.com right now, we wanted to tell you about this, is the Montreal Maroons redesign. And entries for those are due March 8th. You can head on over to hockeyjerseyconcepts.com right now to check out all the rules, to check out the post with all the entries that have come in so far. And you have a little bit of time to put your entry together. It is due March 8th at noon Eastern time. And once the entry phase for that is complete, we'll move into the top 3 vote. And then we begin our new redesign competition. And that is going to be for the Quebec Nordiques. And that will use their unused logo as the primary logo on your concepts, on your entry. So that's coming up beginning March 8th. The Quebec Nordiques unused logo redesign competition begins March 8th on hockeyjerseyconcepts.com. That is all the time we have for you this week. I want to thank Shawn and Beepo for being co-hosts this week with me. And to stay up to date with all of our podcasts, subscribe to the HJC Podcast Network to get notifications when Fake or Authentic comes out every Thursday and when Throwback Throwdown comes out every Saturday. So thank you to all the Jersey nerds for listening. Goodbye, everybody.